Today's topic is defining complex numbers. At the end of the lesson, you will be able to define complex numbers, memorize the values of I, and rewrite radicals to complex numbers and vice versa. The vocab, complex numbers. Complex numbers have a real part, A, plus an imaginary part, B, I. So as a reminder, A is the real part, BI is the imaginary part. Now, within complex numbers, you can have something that's classified as wholly imaginary, meaning it's all imaginary, just a BI part, or something wholly real, which is a whole real part, just the A part. So let's break down this complex number to its real parts and its imaginary parts. 8 is the real part, and the imaginary part is the 1/3 I. Example 2, memorize. I do mean memorize the first 4 values of I. In your graphic organizer, we already wrote that I is the square root of a -1. Now, I squared would mean that I had the square root of -1 squared. Well, the square and the square root cancel each other out, meaning I squared equals -1. We like this because it brings us back to a rational number. I cubed, that'd be saying I times I squared. Well, I squared is -1, but I times -1 leaves me with a -I. Still an imaginary number. I to the 4th means I squared times I squared. I squared equals a -1 times a -1. That gives me a +1. Once again, back to a rational number. So we really like to deal with I squared and I to the 4th. Example 3, we're going to rewrite the radical in terms of I. We can tell that this is going to have an imaginary component because it is a square root of a negative number. So we're going to break the square root of -32 to the square root of -1 times 32. It's the same thing, but now that I have the square root of -1, I can rewrite that using I because I equals the square root of -1. So now I have an I outside of the radical. Inside the radical, I still had a 32, but it's now positive because I took out the I. I need to just simplify the square root of 32 like any normal radical. I can break it down to 4 times 8, but I can keep breaking that down to 4 breaks down to 2 times 2, 8 breaks down to 2 times 2 times 2. I have 2 sets of pairs. If I take one out, that will leave me with 2 2's on the outside and the I. That gives me 4I square root 2. Example 4, we're going to rewrite a complex number back into radicals. So 2I back into radical form. Let's take the I back into the radical. For the I to go back into the radical, it would go back in as a -1. Square root of -1. For 2 to go back inside the radical, it needs to go in as 2 2's. If I simplify that down, -1 times 2 times 2, that's the square root of -4. Lesson recap. At the end of this lesson, you should understand the parts of a complex number, memorize the first 4 values of I, and be able to write radicals in complex numbers back and forth. If you need help, rewatch the video, come in for help, or use the additional resources below.